and get started. So welcome to another episode of Tech Talk Live. This is episode number 59 if you are collecting the whole set. So I want to make sure you have a full catalog there. You should know that this session is being recorded, and that way if Peter says something stupid, we can always play it back over and over again to our endless amusement. And of course, if you have questions, you can put those into the chat window, and we will get to those as we are able. Or you can raise your virtual hand, and well, you can raise your physical hand for all I care, but the virtual one is the only one I'm going to see. So if you do have a question, you can either chat it or raise the hand, and we'll get to you. So what we want to talk about today is the new Alfresco API, which we just launched yesterday at Java 1, and I have with me today on the panel Peter Monks, who is the shepherd and creator of all that is good around the API and developer ergonomics and integrations and things like that. So I think that I just read that off of your business card. Is that your exact title, Peter?
You know, I think it goes on for another couple of paragraphs, but that's pretty good summary. Yeah, thanks, Jim.
I forgot to say you're Australia's favorite son, which is also on your business card. So I didn't mention that. I apologize.
Yeah, if there are any Australians on the call, I may dispute that, but yeah.
I highly doubt it. But why don't we? So I have a few slides. I've taken the slides that we gave at Java 1 yesterday, and I just sort of chopped off the what is Alfresco business off of the front because I think everyone that is joining us today probably is already familiar with Alfresco. So I thought we could jump right in to what we're announcing, and obviously we're not going to. Tech Talk Live is conversational. We don't want to PowerPoint people to death, so these slides are really just a framework for the conversation. But so what is it that we're announcing? So we have this new public API for Alfresco in the cloud, and basically if you're writing a custom application that needs to work with files, you can use this public API to persist that content into Alfresco in the cloud. The Alfresco API has two parts. One is based on CMIS, which stands for Content Management Interoperability Services, and the other one is Alfresco REST calls for things that CMIS doesn't cover. So when you, well, we'll get more into that here in a second. Now, in addition to the API, we also announced the impending availability of the Alfresco Mobile SDK, which is an iOS SDK and an Android SDK, which just wraps the API and helps you work with the API. So if you want to get started today doing mobile app development on top of the public Alfresco API, you can do that, just work with the API directly. But by the end of October, the SDK should be out, and that would sort of help you do that a little bit more efficiently. So as I mentioned, the API is in two parts, CMIS and then sort of proprietary Alfresco REST. So if you've ever worked with CMIS, then you'll know that you can either work with CMIS Atom Pub XML or SOAP web services. And for the Alfresco API, we've only implemented the Atom Pub XML piece of that. Then on the REST side, it's JSON going back and forth. So so right now there is a sort of a difference there with depending on what exact calls you're doing as far as whether you're using XML or JSON. But you know, if you're using an SDK or even just any sort of client library, a lot of that detail should be hidden from you. So it's not. We'll show you some code in a minute, and you'll see that it's not actually a big deal that we have these sort of two differences in the API. Do you want to add anything, to that, Peter?
No, I think that's a really good overview. And maybe the only thing I could add is that we are discussing when and how to expose the SOAP side of CMIS as well. But that's still a TBD. Best not to rely on it anytime soon. I think it's, now that we've got AtomPub out, it's a fairly low priority for us to do SOAP. Obviously, most of the client libraries can deal with either without any real impact to the end application developer. So there's a good chance we'll just live with AtomPub for now, and if and when it makes sense to introduce SOAP with that as well.
Okay, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that we would one day implement all the bindings that the CMIS specification provides.
Exactly. And in fact, the browser binding, which comes in CMIS 1.1, will be a high priority. We actually think that's going to be even more popular than the AtomPub binding. SOAP will probably come along as well, just so that we can really tick well, at least so that we can tick the technical compliance box. Right now, technically, Alfresco's API is not CMIS compliant because of the lack of SOAP. That's actually the only way that it is not compliant. And those of you on the phone who don't care for SOAP probably are wondering why that matters. But SOAP is a mandatory part of the specification, and we don't, by not exposing it in cloud, technically we're not compliant. So we would like to get that compliance in the box. We already obviously have that code implemented. The on-premise product has had it for several years now. We just need to decide when and how to turn that on. And certainly one driver is to get the full check in the box for full compliance with the specification, not just practical compliance, which is what AtomPub gives us.
Yeah. Well, I think the JSON binding would be great, because obviously then we'd have JSON count regardless of whether you're using the CMIS side or the Alfresco REST calls. So I think if I could pick an order, I would say, do the JSON binding next, and then do the SOAP binding after that. But people may have different thoughts on that, I guess.
Yeah, well, and of course the other thing is CMIS 1.1, which includes that new binding, isn't ratified yet. So we're actually just a timing issue more than anything. And I actually happen to agree with you. I think the browser binding is going to be a big boost for CMIS. I think it's going to make CMIS a lot more consumable in browser apps and things of that nature. So yeah, we're very keen to get that in and for the spec to get ratified, and then we can turn that on too.
Cool. So this is the slide that I have up now is the 4 or 5 launch partners that have had early access to the API, and these folks have integrated their applications with Alfresco in the cloud using the API already. So I think it's cool that in fact, Luis is on the call, I believe, that you and Luis have, hustled these partners and got them to integrate their apps, so that when we launched, it wasn't just, here's the documentation, here is some sample code, but we can actually point to these real-world apps that are leveraging the API. So that's cool. This slide is just a list of the kind of the who of those launch partners, and then this slide shows just some screen grabs of these apps to give people an idea of what they're doing. So you've got PDF Pin, which allows people to annotate PDFs that reside in their Alfresco in the cloud account. You've got the MoPrize app in the upper right that pulls together documents that live in Alfresco and organizes them so that you can collaborate on those, like in a meeting and so on. And then the one at the bottom right, which is a sort of a file manager for all of your files, regardless of what cloud service they live in, which is pretty cool. Plus, you just can't resist a picture of a cute baby. It just has to find its way onto a slide. So actually, I think we should probably move right on to some examples to show how this works. So hopefully everyone on the call has a cloud account, And if you don't have a cloud account, you should get one because it doesn't cost anything, and it's actually pretty handy and to use to share files with your colleagues and clients or customers. So you can get that at cloud.alfresco.com, and I'll just log in. I guess I should share my browser real quick, just in case there is the chance that some folks haven't seen it. Let me just do a refresh, make sure I have a session here. Okay, hopefully, Peter, are you seeing my my browser here? Okay, some people are saying yes, so that's great. Okay, good. So I've logged into Alfresco in the cloud, and I have. If I go back, I can show you that this is the global dashboard, and I can see, content that I'm editing. I can see tasks that are waiting for me. I can see my activity stream. I can see all the sites that I belong to, my profile, things that I've recently modified, etc. So for this little demo, we're going to pop into the Alfresco API demo site, and I'm the one and only member of this site, and we can see some activities for things that I've been doing in this site. Let's pop into the document library, and so in the document library, I have folders. I have documents sitting in these folders, and folders can contain folders and so on. So before we move on with that, why don't we stick some things into this site using the API? So let me jump back over here and share another application. Let's do this simple example here. We'll do it's called Get Sites. All of this code, by the way, is on Google Code, and we'll have a link to it here towards the end. So this example, all it does is it connects to the Alfresco cloud and grabs my home network, and then spits that out into sysout, and then grabs the first 10 sites that I'm able to see. And so if we run this, okay, so right now it's Alfresco is asking me to grant access, and I need to share new. It's pulling up a different browser than the one I had shared. Okay, so hopefully you can see that now. So what's happening? These are just command line Java apps, and when you invoke this app, it's making a request to Alfresco, and Alfresco is saying, hey, so this application wants to use your Alfresco in the cloud account, and is that okay? And obviously I'm going to allow it, otherwise this would be a short call. And now when I pop back over to Eclipse, I can see what's happening here. So by virtue of granting access, I've got this access token. It found one network that I belong to. It knows that my home network is alfresco.com, and then it spits out the first 10 sites that it can see. So pretty straightforward little deal, and everything that just happened there used the REST side of the API. And in fact, if we want to, we can actually we can just invoke this in a REST client. So if I pop over to Google Chrome, here's a little REST client, and if I set my authorization header with that access token and do a get, then that's the JSON that comes back, and my code just parses that JSON and then looks at what comes back. So here are the entries that come back, alfresco.com. So these are network objects. This is a network object, I guess, and this is my home network. So that's just a simple example, but we could. Somebody's asking, what tool is this? This is the dev HTTP client, which is available in the Google Chrome store, and I haven't used it a whole lot. I used it because it had a nice UI and it demoed well. So Sort of an embarrassing reason to use it, but it works. So, so let's go grab the site's URL, and where did I define that? And we'll invoke that in the REST client. So you can see what that looks like. Now, all of these URLs that I'm invoking here are documented, and if you go to developer.com, you will see the link to the documentation. I also realized that I skipped over the part about signing up for an API key, so should probably talk about that at some point. So again, now I'm just asking to get a list of sites. In this case, I did not restrict the count like I did in that Java snippet. So you can see this pagination object comes back with any list that you retrieve, and it tells me that it gave me the first 100 sites I can see, and it tells me that there are more items, so I can page through this result set. And then here is a list of entries. Okay, so if we pop back over and actually look at this code, you can see that all we're doing is I'm using Google's OAuth 2 client, and so that whole flow of requesting the token and getting the code back that comes back after the access is granted, and all that stuff is handled for me. So, the code that we're looking at here is just about executing or invoking those URLs. So, in the first call, I grab the Alfresco API URL and create a URL for that. I ask Google's OAuth request factory to build a GET request. Then I execute that request, and then I parse the JSON that comes back. And I've defined a set of little POJOs that represent the JSON that come back, so that I can sort of work with those objects. So then I just sort of output how many networks came back in the list, and in this case, I'm defaulting to the first and only network that comes back and saying that's my home network. The right way to do that is to actually look at that home network flag that's in the JSON that comes back. And then once I get the home network, then I can ask for sites, the list of sites. So again, we go grab the API URL, we append my home network to that, we append the sites URL, and then there are qualifiers that you can put onto the end of these URLs. In this case, I'm saying I only want 10 results, so don't bring me back everything. Then I build that request, execute it, and parse that result, and then I iterate over the site entries. So that's just a very, very simple example for getting the home network, getting some sites, and iterating over those sites. So should we see a more elaborate example that sort of mixes CMIS and REST calls? It's probably a good next place to go. So as we mentioned, the API is two parts, and when you're working with, I think I may have a slide on this actually. Let me pop back over to WebEx. How do I go back to my slides here? Uh-oh, now I've done it.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Max. Thanks for jumping in. Why have I lost my ability to flip back over to the slide?
You should see a floating toolbar at the top of your screen. So if you mouse over that, you should see a blue return button with a left arrow.
Oh yeah, the big shiny round button that says, "Hey, yeah, dummy, click this." One.
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
And now just tab across. Perfect.
Very nice. Okay, cool. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that OAuth stuff that we just saw happen, in case there are people on here that aren't familiar with how that works. And then I want to talk about what the REST API covers, and then we'll jump back over and see the CMIS example, if that's okay with everyone. You can sign up for a developer key at developer.alfresco.com, and that's easy to do. It only takes a few minutes. You'll give your username and password or your email address. You'll get an email. You confirm that. Then you log in and create applications. And for every application that you create, you'll have an API key and a secret. So you'll sign up for that key. Alfresco will assign you the key and the secret. You then place that wherever it needs to be for your code. In my case, I am using the Google OAuth client, which I'm using kind of an older version that has a place in a constant in the code where you can put your token and your secret. Then when you invoke that authorized URL, the user will be shown a page that asks them for permission to use, for your app to use their account. The user grants access. We then redirect back to your application's callback URL. So in my case, this was a command line example, and what happens is that there's a little Jetty server that starts up when you run that code, and when the callback URL gets invoked, there's a listener on that Jetty server that catches the callback. That code, there's a code that gets passed back in the callback, so your application needs to grab that code and exchange that code for an access token. Then Alfresco will give you back an access token and an expiration, and with that access token, you can then repeatedly access the Alfresco in the cloud until that token expires, at which point you just refresh the token. So all of those details, actually everything on this slide pretty much, was hidden from me because of using the OAuth client. So I don't actually have to worry that much about how that works. If you want to hit those URLs yourself and not use an OAuth library, that's certainly totally fine with us. So it looks like Richard Esplin has a question.
Yeah, a question from IRC from yesterday when we were discussing the new API. Will OAuth 2 be coming to Alfresco Enterprise Edition at some point?
Peter, you want to take that one?
Sorry, I've upgraded to iOS 6, and my phone keeps auto-locking, which means unmuting is like a 6-swipe button, rub your stomach, pat your head exercise. Sorry, can you repeat the question? I forgot it in wrestling with my
Richard,
phone.
Yeah, Peter. So Richard is just asking, is OAuth 2 coming to Enterprise Edition anytime soon?
The plan is to, well, certainly we're considering adding it to Enterprise. At this stage, it's not clear whether there are clear benefits to doing so. The feeling right now, and this is something I guess we'd love some validation, some feedback. The feeling right now is that the idea, let me take a step back. The central idea with OAuth is that the user gets to pick which applications they use, and then the user also balances that application can use third-party services such as Alfresco. So if you download MoPrize, or you're using Episoft or FilePicker, or really any of those launch partners that you saw in the earlier slide, you're choosing to use that application. When you choose to connect that application to Alfresco, you'll be asked to confirm with Alfresco that app can access Alfresco on your behalf. It's not clear if that model makes sense in the enterprise. In the enterprise, we think the provisioning model is more likely to be some kind of IT person, someone who does rollouts or mobile tablet rollouts or whatever it is. Those folks are generally selecting the software that you will use on your behalf, and they would rather that you don't have to go through an additional approval step in order to make that work. They would rather install SAP, install, you know, NetSuite, whatever it is, whatever software you're using, and then install Alfresco Enterprise and have any mobile apps that you're using, for example, just connect natively to Alfresco. So the short answer is we're not sure if OAuth makes sense in the enterprise. That additional user step of having to approve access for each app may be a hindrance and maybe something that enterprises don't necessarily like. That said, we're definitely keen to do it from a technical perspective. I think it makes sense to have a single OAuth mechanism that all applications can rely upon, and that means that application developers themselves have a simplified development experience. They just do OAuth, and whether the target server is cloud or on-premise, that's fine. It'll just work. But yeah, I think we've got the bigger discussion to have internally about whether we think that business case, whether the OAuth flow makes sense in the enterprise, or in fact whether it's a hindrance.
Cool. So what you may be wondering, sort of, what does the REST API cover? And this list will expand over time, but right now it covers things like finding the sites, which you saw me do a second ago, finding the members of those sites, finding the favorite sites of somebody, getting a list of networks, which you saw me do, getting the people, the people details, containers for a site. So that means like the document library folder that's in the root of a site. I'll show you an example of that in a minute. The activity stream, ratings for a node, comments on a node, tags on a node. So those are the things that are covered, and you can look at the documentation that I mentioned earlier that's on the developer portal to find the exact URLs and syntax, both for making those calls and for getting the response back. Now, when you want to do something with documents and folders, creating documents and folders, for example, then you'll be using CMIS. And I'm going to, unless someone chats that they want to hear more about CMIS, I'm going to just assume that you either already know what it is or you know enough to be dangerous, and we will skip the sort of high-level information about CMIS, and we'll just jump right back into a code example. So, are you seeing my my Eclipse right now, or do I need to share it or something again? Hold on.
We're still seeing the slide.
The slide. Okay, thank you. I'll pop back into Eclipse. It's like, I don't know what's going on. I'm like unfrozen WebEx guy today, like I've done a WebEx. But so here we are looking at another example. This is a CMIS create document example. And what we'll do here is we will grab the root folder ID. And in this case, what I'm talking about is the document library folder in a site. I happen to know what the path is, just like probably everyone on the call knows how to path their way to the document library folder in a site, but I'm just pretending that I don't know that path, and I just want to ask, using the REST API, what is that folder's ID? So we can look at this call in a second. Then, once I have that folder, then I will use CMIS to create a new folder. So I'm going to create a subfolder in the document library folder, and we'll just call that test folder or something. Then I will jump back over to the REST API and do a like. So I'll do a like on that folder, and then we'll jump back to the CMIS API and create a document in that new subfolder. And then finally, I will jump back to the REST API and create a comment on that document. So let's give this a run and see it work. So again, it's I won't bore you with the fact that it's asking me to grant access again. The reason why it's the same, it's asking me to grant that again is because I didn't persist the credential. So if you persist the OAuth credential, then you can continue to make invocations against the API as that user until that user denies your ability to do that. So it looks like we have created the folder, we liked the folder, we created the document, and then we commented. So everything appears to have worked. So let's pop over to Google Chrome. Let me share that again. And let's go into the document library and do a refresh. And now here's the test folder that I just created. And interesting that I'm not seeing the like. That's the first time that hasn't worked. So I'm not sure what's going on there. I'm going to refresh just in case here. Okay, that gives me something to look at for later. Here is the sample a.pdf that got uploaded to the test folder. And if I pop that open, it will open in the previewer. And if I scroll down, I do see the comment. So it looks like everything worked fine except for the like on that folder, which is a mysterious issue, which I will take a look at when we get a chance. So that's a simple example showing just sort of crossing back and forth. The other quick example I'll do is a custom aspect example. So I guess not a custom aspect, but just adding an aspect and setting some metadata on the aspect. So let's go look at the CMIS aspect example. And what I have here is a folder full of images that are JPEGs, and I'm going to use Tika on my side to extract some metadata. And when we create the object, we'll tell CMIS that we want to add the geographic aspect to those objects and then set the latitude and longitude on those objects. So you can see in the sys out here that it's already got a couple in here, and because I'm using slow wireless, it takes a little bit. So if I jump back over to Chrome and go back out to the document library and look in this images folder, then here comes the images, and you can see it's got the geographic aspect set, which means that if I jump into the document details, I can do things like view on a Google map, and I can see the latitude, longitude properties being set here. Sorry about the siren going by there. So I've just clicked on that. So I guess if you know the content model that's available in the Alfresco cloud, then you're able to add those aspects and set those properties. All right. So see if I can get back over to the slides without totally losing my place here. Let me skip forward through the CMIS stuff. If you need to learn CMIS, there's a book, CMIS and Apache Chemistry in Action, so go check that out. Let's see, a few things to consider about the API here, and then I want Peter, you to show the Grails app, and maybe we can just have a general discussion here and start answering some of the questions that you haven't been able to get to already. There are rate limits associated with these accounts. Sorry, here comes another siren. There we go. So if we have two plans, and I guess maybe we should talk about signing up for an account here. But if you're a developer, if you're on the developer plan, it's you can have 5 requests per second, 10,000 requests per day. The production plan is 50 requests per second, 100,000 requests per day, and there's no cost associated as a developer for either of these plans. So this is just a way for us to sort of tier the the load that we have. And so, you know, when you're developing your app, we want you to stay on the development plan. When you think you're ready for production, just go into your Alfresco developer portal and change your application to say that you're in production. And Peter, when something goes into production, is it just a matter of changing that flag in the developer portal, or do we do a review of that, or how does that work?
Yeah, good question. So right now, any developer can just request an upgrade. There's just a button in the portal that says, hey, I want to request that I move from the development plan to the production plan. And then that goes into a queue that we're monitoring. Right now, we don't really have formal guidelines identified. It's really more of an opportunity for us to talk with you and find out a little bit more about your app, whether there are other opportunities, get a better sense of what it does functionally and so forth. Then we'll make a call. I should also mention that there will be probably a more formal process, like we'll actually start to get a checklist and some criteria as we develop our technology partner program, and that's something that Luis has been spearheading. So there is some information, I believe, already on the www site that's starting to outline what that is. I think Luis, I can see him typing. He may be putting in the URL for that into the chat. If you're a technology company, if you're someone who's developing apps for sale to customers of your own and wish to integrate with Alfresco Cloud, I need to talk to you about it. Certainly plan won't be an issue in that case, provided it's not competitive and so on. But yeah, in a nutshell, it's a simple request on the developer's part, and then we review it. And we'll get more definitive guidelines up probably the next couple of weeks.
Okay, great.
This is Luis, just real quick to add to that. So I just posted a URL for our technology partner program, but we're definitely encouraging app developers out there, if you want to build a real application that integrates into Alfresco Cloud, to apply for membership into the program. The program membership is free, and if we accept you into that program, and we do need to accept you, we want to make sure that it's a real app, right? Then you will have the option to do things like purchase support contracts and stuff like that if your particular use case demands it. But we really do want to grow the ecosystem of applications in the cloud, on premises, and in mobile that integrate into Alfresco in as many ways as possible. So it goes hand in hand with basically what the community team, Jeff and company, are doing in terms of just getting more and more developers to use Alfresco.
Cool. Michael, you asked. Michael has chatted a question: is there a cost for these APIs? Right now, there's no plan to monetize this on the developer side. Except if you want to, as Luis was saying, if you want to take it up a notch, do a commercial app, and join the program and get developer support and things like that. But if you just want to sign up and develop an application using the API keys, there's no cost to that. There's also no limit on the number of applications that you can add to your account. Probably every app that you develop should definitely have a unique application entry and a unique set of keys listed there in the developer portal. A reminder that Alfresco Cloud users own their content. So unlike some other sort of consumer-grade file sharing apps that are out there where they assert ownership over that content that goes into their system, our users own their content. So you as a developer don't own their content, even if your application helps them create or modify that content. So they own that content. So just kind of keep that in mind. Also, the examples that I've shown here have used OpenCMS 0.8.0 snapshot. I know the chemistry OpenCMS team is busy making a stable build for 0.8. So when that stable build is available, which I anticipate maybe a week, 2 weeks, that'll be the version that you'll want to use. Because I think that's I don't think anything older than that will work. I haven't tested it, but I think you'll require 0.8. similarly, if you're doing Python instead of Java and you're using SemaSlide, you'll want to take what's on head right now, and I'll get a release of SemaSlide out as soon as I can, so that there will be a stable release that will work. So, Peter, do you want to show the Grails app, or do you want to show? I know Gethin has a Java web app example, or do we want to show any other examples, or what?
Yeah, I'd be able to jump into the Grails app, and then I guess if there are more questions, or if people want to see a more Java-centric one, we can flip over.
Okay, cool.
And actually, I'm glad you mentioned Gethin, because one thing I did want to point out is that this has been a lot of hard work on the part of a large number of people, but the two people who I think are on the call, but certainly who deserve the most credit, are Gethin James and Steve Glover. They're both the engineers, or the two engineers who are primarily responsible for delivering the API functionality and, you know, validating our OAuth implementation, things like that. So I really want to give a big thank you to them, because they've been working really hard for quite some time on this, and it's really been, you know, I think this is a great testament to the work they've put into it. So thanks to you two for all your hard work. So my Grails app, and you can see, hopefully, actually maybe I need to share first. I do apologize, share my desktop. Like if someone could just raise their hand or mention when they can see my screen. Okay, looks like we're good. So what I'm showing here is the location, just so everyone can get started, and I'll copy that into the chat after I finish presenting. But this is up on GitHub. I put the code up. It's fairly dirty code. It's a fairly quick and dirty example, but hopefully should let you get started. And the intention, my intention, was to show, primarily to walk through the OAuth process and to show the OAuth process as a user would see it. So Gethin has a very low-level example, for example, that lets you manually step through each of the steps in the OAuth handshake, and that's an excellent way to learn about what actually happens in the handshake. But the end user experience is much simpler. They don't see all of the steps that are going on, and what I wanted to do is write an app that just showed the end user experience. So that's what this Grails app does, and let me start off by showing it to you, and let me make sure we're running. Looks like we are. So my Grails app is not very pretty. I'm new to Grails, so if you look at the code, you'll probably, and you're a experienced Grails developer, you'll probably think it's not particularly good, but it does what it does, and it seems to work okay, and it's a wonderful environment to experiment with this kind of thing in. So the code may not be pretty, but it gets the job done. So what we see here is the root URI of my app, and it really doesn't do anything except say, click here to authorize this app to use your Alfresco cloud account. Now, when I click this, you get the OAuth pop-up, and you saw this earlier with Jeff's command line example. Command line obviously is a little bit more tricky because you're flipping between the command line and a web browser. With a web app, it's a much more natural experience, and that's something that, in fact, OAuth is well suited for, as web apps that talk to other web services. So I'm just going to log into cloud here and allow my app. And when we get back, the app refreshes, that same page refreshes, but now that we have the access token, you saw earlier Jeff had that access token that he was pasting around into his REST client. This app basically just checks if the access token. If we do, we make it we get the network. I actually went one step further. If once we have the networks, I made them hyperlinked, and I get some information about that network. So I get a little bit of initial information as well as a whole bunch of sites. Maybe this is the first set of sites that I have access to. And this is production cloud, so please don't look too closely at some of these names. There's probably some sites in here that, you know, are not for public consumption. I think I'll go back. And that's basically it for my app right now. I do intend to make it a bit more fully featured. I'd like to have a little app that can show all of the sites, not just the first page, as I've done here, and then lets you drill down into the sites and into the doc lives of the sites and have a look at the metadata properties for the files and all that sort of stuff. But that's pretty much it. I don't want to make this a full read-write client for Alfresco. I really just want it to be a quick way to A, verify that the OAuth handshake is working, and B, provide some nice, easy read-only information via the API. So let's switch over and have a look at the code. And this background, I've quite a black background, so this may not be visible. Can someone give a thumbs up, thumbs down as to readability? Jeff is saying it looks great. So I'm going to leave it alone. I don't want to mess up my my settings. So this is the Grails controller. I've written it as a single controller. It's not a multi-controller app yet. And that controller does a couple of different actions. There's a default action index, and it's very simple. This is actually line 70 or line 52 to 75 is it for the index action. So that initial page we saw where it said click here to authorize, and then once you authorized it displayed the networks, that's encapsulating this one function here. Now I'm doing something that's a little bit different. I'm actually putting the access code or the access token into the session. That's not really a good way to do it. You're better off persisting these inside a user object of some sort, and I know Jeff's got some quite fancy things going on in his Python client where, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but it stores the OAuth tokens into the keychain on Mac OS or into the user store, I guess, on other operating systems, and that's a good approach, and it's certainly a lot more sophisticated. For something simple like this, I really just wanted to do it quick and dirty, and I didn't want databases or that kind of infrastructure entering into the picture. So what we do is, let me start with the else branch first, and this is really just showing what happens when we don't have that access token yet. In this case, I'm actually using a library called Spring Social, and Spring Social is basically some infrastructure as part of the Spring framework that makes dealing with OAuth protected services easier. And in fact, Jared Otley, who's on the call, has been working over the last couple of weeks on an Alfresco plugin for Spring Social that basically brings an Alfresco API into the Spring Social framework. So Spring Social, with this plugin, can now connect to Alfresco. It hides you as a Java, or in this case, Groovy developer, from a lot of the details of the handshake, so on, from an OAuth perspective. And then on top of that, it actually provides a client API for the REST APIs as well, and that's sort of some nice, that's certainly a nice convenience feature. It's not strictly necessary, but it certainly makes parsing the JSON responses and dealing with HTTP status code a lot easier. So you can see here in this case, I basically am just getting, my redirect URL, and then creating one of these connections and building the authentication URL. And the great thing about that is that's all handled by Spring Social and the Alfresco plugin for Spring Social. The only thing I need to do is provide basically the callback URL, this redirect URL. And that redirect URL is what the OAuth service, in this case Alfresco Cloud, will redirect back to with the token. And that's basically it for this part of the logic. There's also a view, which I'll show very quickly. There it is here, where I do the pop-up. And the pop-up is just a standard JavaScript pop-up. I mean, this is the entire view. There's no more code than this. It's literally just these 39 lines. And all I do is I pop up this pop-up window with the URL that is returned by this method right here, this build authenticate URL. So Spring Social tells me this is the Alfresco URL you need to hit in order to get that little login, authorize, allow, deny window. And then in my app, I'm choosing to display that in a pop-up. You don't have to do it that way. That's just how I've seen it done with Twitter and Google and other OAuth services. So that's what I chose to do here. And then once we've gone through the flow, what the OAuth server does is it redirects back to you with the access token. So think of that pop-up as having an Alfresco URL. In fact, I think I can show this to you if I invalidate my token, start again. If you look at the URL, you can see the URL of this pop-up is an api.alfresco.com URL. This is the authorization URL. When I type in my address and click my email address and click allow, what's actually happening is this is posting to the Alfresco server, api.alfresco.com. So my app never sees my password. In fact, it never sees my user ID either. The only thing I get is either a success or failure. And in the case of a success, I get that access token. It'll be a little bit too quick to see here, but when I click allow, you'll very briefly see on the web page, it'll say, nothing to see here, move along. That's actually just a message I put in so that I could see the redirects working. You might also watch the address bar as I click this. Here we go. Let's see. WebEx may not cooperate, but nothing to see here move along. It was there very briefly on my screen. I don't know if WebEx picked it up, but what happens is after that, the username and password are posted to Alfresco, Alfresco, if it's successful, of course, will redirect back to that redirect URI, which is back inside your application. And one of the things that's passed along is a token. That token is then traded for an access token, so there's actually another HTTP request occurring in the background. And at that point, you have an access token, and that access token is what you would then use for subsequent API calls. The access token remains valid for a day, and then there is a refresh token that allows you to basically transparently refresh the access token when it expires after that 20-day period. And that refresh token remains valid right now for 7 days. There are some services that actually use longer times for those refresh tokens. It gives you longer before the user has to re-authenticate the app. Right now, we're just basically we picked 7 days as just a starting point. Well, we may tune that. We will tune that as as we see these applications in play. And that's really it from a perspective. You can see here's the logic for my callback. It really doesn't do very much at all. It just calls Spring Social to exchange that authorization code for an access token. In the background, it's doing the HTTP post back to Alfresco and saying, hey, Alfresco, we just got this authorization code. Please convert it into an access token. One of the things that surprised me a little bit as I went through this, particularly as I went through it manually using Gethin's test app, is that there are a lot more HTTP requests and forth than what the user sees. The user really only sees those 3 interactions: the app showing a click here to authorize page, the pop-up, and then the application actually showing the result of a successful API call. In actual fact, there's several more things going on, including the callback redirect, including the trading of the authorization code for an access token that the user never sees. Those are all automated steps. It is worth stepping through this a little bit. Spring Social makes it significantly easier. I'll say if you're a Java developer, that is absolutely where I recommend starting. But understand the flow certainly, is not a bad thing, and it helps with some of the debugging when you're wondering, why things are taking a little longer. It may very well be that there's a lot more network communication going on than you might have otherwise expected. So that's really it for my Grails app. I don't know if there's any questions on any of this. I'll try to bring up the chat window just to see.
Why don't I?
Sorry, Jeff.
I was just going to say, if we have no more questions on the Grails app, maybe we'll flip back over to the slides and go to a resource page here.
Yep, that sounds good.
Okay. So you may be wondering sort of where to get help with this stuff. So we have an Alfresco API forum, so you can ask questions there. We have the Pound Alfresco room on Freenode IRC. There is the Alfresco Technical Discussion Google group, so you can send questions to that if you're into sort of more the listserv kind of model. The code that I showed earlier is there on shown on this slide. It's in Google code. I have Python examples that do essentially the equivalent to what you saw in the Java examples. And I have the project set up, but I haven't uploaded that code yet because I'm still doing a little bit of cleanup. So that'll be there soon. And if you're in San Francisco, you can come by the booth today. Peter and I are both at Java 1 hanging out at the booth all day long. So those are some places where you can get help. And then also, Peter has his Grails app at GitHub, and so we can chat that URL out. And Gethin has a Java web app, which is also on GitHub, so we will share where that is. And really, what we want to encourage you to do is these 3 steps. So the first thing is go sign up for a cloud account if you don't have one already. Then register, become a registered developer at developer.alfresco.com, and you can secret there. And then just start participating in the community. Ask questions or answer questions in the forums. Join us in chat on IRC. Join us on Twitter, etc. I should also here, as we sort of get towards the end, I should make sure to plug DevCon, which is happening in Berlin on November 6th and 7th, as well as San Jose, November 14th and 15th. And Peter and Gethin will be giving talks on the API and the developer portal and things like that, and we'll be available to answer questions. Definitely come to hang out with Alfresco in person at one of these two events. So you can go to devcon.alfresco.com to learn more about the conference. Let's see. What other questions or thoughts are there here? I guess I should mention that if you want to see some of these demos in a little bit more detail, I have screencasts on YouTube, and I can jump over and grab that. So if you just want to watch these again, you can do that. But you know, the code is straightforward enough. You can just go grab the code and just try it yourself. So let me go grab this URL. But in the meantime, are there any other questions that we have?
You're not on fire, are you, Jeff? I just want to double check.
I should probably check just to make sure that, yeah, no, I think everything is fine. I don't know what's going on. With this heat wave that's happening in San Francisco, I wouldn't be surprised if things are spontaneously bursting into flames. It's been incredible. I'm looking forward to getting back to Texas and the cooler temperatures. Anyway, if you want to watch these screencasts, there's a playlist that has these demos in a screencast form. Other than that, it looks like we've come to the end of another Tech Talk. So we will be sending out the slides and the recording of the session. And we will be doing this again in December. So November, we will not be having a Tech Talk live because of DevCon. So the next Tech Talk Live will be the first Wednesday in December. And I believe Richard McKnight is going to be telling us all about the practical sort of advanced developer tidbits, tips and tricks and things that he's learned in his consulting engagements and things like that. So I think he'll be talking about migrating from AVM to DM and who knows, all kinds of things that Richard will be enlightening us with. So join us. I'm just looking to see if I can figure out what that exact date is. I think Max told me, and I've forgotten. So Max, what's the date on the next? Oh, it's the 5th of December. Cool. Yep. So 5th of December, we will see you here again, same time, same channel. And until then, have fun hacking the Alfresco API. Thanks for joining us, Peter and Luis and Richard. It's been a good time.